I'm going to teach you how to have a conversation about jobs. In this lesson, I will give you a lot of expressions to both talk about your own job and ask other people about their jobs. Now, when two people have a conversation about their jobs, it will usually start with one person asking this question: what do you do, or what do you do for a living? Now, for a living is optional, meaning that you can say it if you want, or you can leave it out. That's why it's in parentheses. Don't worry so much about what it means. It's just a common English expression. So the question is, what do you do, or what do you do for a living? And this is just a polite way of asking, what is your job? So you can use this question to ask another person. Now, when you have to say about your job, there are two ways you can do this. One is to say who you are. For example, teacher, engineer, accountant, or manager. So you can say, I am a teacher, or I am an engineer, or I am a software programmer, etc. Or you can say, I work as an accountant, or I work as a manager. Another way is to say what industry or field you work in, or what company you work for. For example, I work in advertising. That means that advertising is your field or your industry. Or I work in finance. Finance is related to money. Or I work in health. That is healthcare. That means you do some job related to medicine. You can also say what company you work for. You'll notice here that I've written at, in, and for. That's because you can choose one. It doesn't really matter which one you use. They all have the same meaning in this context. So I work for Apple. I'm sure you know Apple. That's the company that makes iPhones and iPads. So if you work for a big company like Microsoft or Google or Apple, then you can say the name of the company. Okay, so I work for Apple or Microsoft. But if the other person may not know your company, then you can say something like, I work in a bank, or I work at a law firm, or I work at a restaurant. And then if the other person asks what company you work in, you can then give the name of your company. Now, one other thing you can do is you can say, I work as a, let's say, accountant. So I work as an accountant in a law firm. So you can combine this first way of saying what you do with what company you work in. Or I work as a manager in a bank or at a restaurant. Okay, so this is talking generally about what you do. So let's say you say what you do and you also ask the other person what they do. Now, to keep the conversation going, you can ask for more details about the other person's job. Now, it's not a good idea to sound like the police and ask, so what do you do in your job? Instead, you want to show interest and you want to ask this more politely. A good way to do that is to say, what kind of work do you do, or what sort of work do you do? So let's say that you meet someone and you ask them, what do you do for a living? And that person says, I work in fashion. Sounds very interesting, right? So now you can say, oh, what kind of work do you do? That shows interest, right? Now, when you want to give details about your job, it's good to start with a phrase like this, basically I. So let's say I'm a teacher. Of course, I am a teacher. Basically, I teach English to both working people and to children. Or if I'm a website designer, I might say, I mainly create designs for websites. In talking about your job, you can also use one of these expressions. These are very professional sounding expressions. For example, I handle accounts at the law firm where I work. I handle accounts. It's kind of like saying I take care of accounts. Or let's say I work in a restaurant. I am responsible for purchasing the ingredients and supplies that the chefs need. So I'm responsible for purchasing the vegetables, the meat, and all the other things that the chefs need to cook their food. Okay? Or let's say I take care of office maintenance. That means I'm responsible for keeping the office clean and tidy, so I'm like the office manager. Okay? Or if you're a manager or supervisor who works with people, you can say, I manage a team of 10 people, or I supervise a team of 10 software programmers. All right, so that's how you give details about your job. Now, by this stage of the conversation, you have spoken generally about who you are and what you do. You've also given details about what you do in your job. Now, to develop the conversation even further, you can talk about likes and dislikes. And I have some expressions here to do that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you talk about likes and dislikes, if you just ask, so hey, do you like your job? That can sound a little rude. Instead, it's a very good idea to pay careful attention to what the other person says about their job and ask them about some specific aspect of their job. For example, let's say I'm a kindergarten teacher. That means I teach little children. So you can ask, so do you enjoy teaching children? See how that's more specific. Or if I'm an accountant. Accountant means I deal with accounts. There's a lot of numbers involved. So you can ask, do you like working with numbers? And now the other person knows that you've been listening to them, and they will be more interested in giving you details. Okay, when you want to talk about liking or not liking your job, you can start with something like this. I really enjoy it. Means I really enjoy my job. Or no, I don't really enjoy it. After you say that, you can give reasons by describing your job. Over here, I have some expressions. These are all positive adjectives. Adjective means it's used to describe something. And these are negative adjectives. And all of these are used for describing jobs. So after you say, I really enjoy my job, you can say, it's very interesting or it's very exciting. Challenging means that your job is difficult, but you enjoy it. You like the challenge. Or I might say, I find my job, or I find it quite satisfying or quite rewarding. They both mean the same thing. They mean that you get a lot of satisfaction or happiness out of your work. So if I'm a kindergarten teacher, I might say, so you asked me, do you like teaching children? And I would say, yes, I really enjoy it. It's very rewarding. And what I like about it most is seeing children improve and speaking English. That's what I like most about my job. Now, if you don't like your job, you can say, no, I don't really enjoy it. I find it quite boring, or it's very monotonous. This word here is monotonous. Monotonous. Monotonous means that you have to do the same thing over and over again in your job. It's very repetitive. Or your job might be very stressful, meaning there's a lot of stress or pressure and you can't handle it. Or I find my job quite exhausting. Exhausting means you're tired by the end of the day. Maybe because you have to do a lot of physical work, you have to move things around. Okay, so it's very exhausting. All right, so this is how you ask for or you ask whether someone likes their job, and you also say whether you like your job and why. All right, let's now quickly recap what we've learned in this lesson. You start the conversation by asking, what do you do, or what do you do for a living? This is a general question, and you can say who you are to answer this question, or you can say what industry you work in or what company you work for. The next stage of the conversation starts with the question, what kind of work or what sort of work do you do? This is a polite way of asking what someone has to do in their job. And you can use one of these expressions to talk about what you do in your job. You can start with basically, or you can say I mainly, and you can say what you do. The next stage of the conversation is talking about likes and dislikes. Remember to ask a specific question based on what the other person has said. So do you enjoy teaching children? Do you like designing websites, etc.? When it's your turn, you can say whether you like or you don't like your job, and then you can say why using one of these adjectives. All right, I'm sure that now you can have interesting and exciting conversations about your job. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Remember to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in another lesson soon.